I didn't cry when I gone. I just stood there in the middle of my own living room holding a piece of paper that had my signature on it, and I thought, they really thought I was going to let this go. I'm 31 years old. I work as a compliance officer at a mid-sized logistics firm in Columbus, Ohio. I have a 9-year-old son named Cooper who likes baseball and hates broccoli and still crawls into my bed during thunderstorms. I'm not rich. I'm not some heiress with a trust fund. I'm a woman who worked 2 jobs through college, drove a 2008 Honda Civic until it literally died on I-270, and built something from nothing after my marriage fell apart when Cooper was 4. And for 3 years, I paid for my younger brother's college education. Not helped. Paid. As in, I was the one writing the checks. Let me back up. My brother Hayden is 5 years younger than me. Growing up, he was the kind of kid who could charm anyone. Teachers, our grandparents, strangers at the grocery store. He had this easy smile and a way of making everyone feel like they were the most important person in the room. My parents adored him, not in the small, quiet way they loved me, in the loud, proud, centerpiece of every conversation way. Hayden's grades, Hayden's braids pentil. I didn't resent him for it when we were kids. I told myself it was just birth order stuff. Middle children get overlooked, whatever. When I was 26, I finalized my divorce. Cooper was barely 4. My ex-husband wasn't abusive, he was just absent in every way that mattered, financially included. The settlement was clean but thin. I got the apartment, a car payment, and a child I loved more than anything in my life. I didn't call my Cleon. I didn't cry best friend in a panic. I didn't call my dramatically on. Around the same time, Hayden was finishing his junior year of high school. He'd been accepted to Ohio State, which is a real achievement, genuinely. But my parents had nothing saved. My dad had been laid off twice in 5 years. My mom worked part-time at a dental office. They sat me down one evening, the 3 of them, and my dad said the words I would spend the next several years regretting agreeing to. You're the responsible one. You always figured it out. We just need you to help get him started. Help get him started turned into me co-signing his federal student loans, then into me covering the gap between his financial aid and his actual tuition every semester because he'd chosen a major business management that didn't qualify for certain grants, then into covering his off-campus apartment when the dorms weren't working for him, then into a monthly allowance that my mom called just to cover groceries and that I knew went toward far more than that. Over 3 years, I calculated it once on a spreadsheet at midnight when I couldn't sleep. $43,000. That's what I put into my brother's education and living expenses while I was also paying for after-school care for my son, building up an emergency fund from scratch, and eating a lot of pasta because it was cheap and filling. I want to be fair to myself here. I didn't do it under duress. No one held a gun to my head. I did it because I genuinely believed that families showed up for each other, and that if I helped Hayden get established, we would have the kind of relationship where he'd show up for me too someday. I believed in the idea of my family, even when the actual evidence was thin. Hayden graduated in May of last year, business degree, decent GPA, job lined up at a marketing firm in Cincinnati. My parents threw him a graduation party, a real one, at a rented event space near our hometown of Dayton. Catered, open bar, photo booth with props. They'd been planning it for months. I found out about it on Facebook. Not because I wasn't invited, I was, but the post my mom made, the one with the venue details and the proud caption about her son, had a photo attached. It was the save the date image she'd sent to everyone. There were 4 people in it, my parents, Hayden, and his girlfriend Priya, who he'd been with for about 8 months. I was not in it. Cooper was not in it. I figured it was an oversight. I told myself that. I messaged my mom and she said, "Oh, the photo was just for the invitation design. It's not a big deal." Hayden texted me a thumbs up emoji when I congratulated him on graduating. That was it. That was the thanks. I drove down to Dayton for the party anyway because Cooper wanted to see his grandparents, and because I kept telling myself I was reading too much into it. The party was at a place called the Linden Room. Nice venue. Exposed brick. Good lighting. There were probably 80 people there. Hayden's friends, extended family, neighbors I hadn't seen in years. There was the slideshow running on a loop on a projector screen by the bar. Photos of Hayden growing up, soccer trophies, prom night, college move-in day, his study abroad semester in Barcelona. Cooper and I were not in a single frame. Not one photo. 3 years of Sunday dinners where Cooper sat at that table. 3 years of holidays. His 7th birthday where we all went to a Columbus Clippers game together. Not one. I stood there holding a glass of water, watching my son watch the slideshow, and I waited to see if maybe one photo was coming. Maybe they'd saved something for the end. Maybe there was a family segment I hadn't seen yet. There wasn't. What happened next I didn't plan. I want to be honest about that. I had no strategy in that moment. I was just a woman standing in a room, feeling invisible in a way that had a very specific and financial shape to it. I found my brother near the catering table. He was laughing with 2 of his college friends, beer in hand, relaxed in the way that people are when they feel completely secure. I touched his arm. He turned around. I said quietly so no one else could hear, "There are no photos of me or Cooper in that slideshow." He looked at me for a second. Then he said, "Priya helped put it together. She didn't really know what to include." That was it. That was the answer. Priya didn't know what to include. Priya, who he'd been dating for 8 months. Priya, who had nothing to do with the $43,000 that got him to this party. I smiled. I said okay, and I went back to my son, and I got him a plate of food, and I stayed for exactly 45 more minutes, so it wouldn't look like I'd left in anger, and then I told my mom we had a long drive and we left. On the way home, Cooper fell asleep in the back seat. I drove the whole 2 hours in silence. No music, just the highway and my thoughts, which were very, very clear. When I got home, I put Cooper to bed. Then I went to my office, which is really just a corner of my bedroom with a desk, and I opened my files. I have a folder on my laptop called Financial Documents, and inside it I have subfolders for every significant financial transaction I've ever made. Receipts, bank statements, wire transfers, co-signed loan paperwork. I had everything. 3 years of everything. My brother had 1 federal student loan remaining, a $14,000 balance from his final year, that I had co-signed. He'd been making the minimum payments. Technically, the loan was his responsibility, but co-signers have legal standing when the primary borrower misses payments, and I knew something Hayden apparently didn't fully think about. I had submitted a refinancing inquiry 6 months earlier, and during that process, I'd asked the loan servicer a very specific question about co-signer release conditions. The answer was he hadn't applied for co-signer release, which meant, under the terms of the original agreement, I still had co-signer rights, including the ability to request the loan be recalled to a different servicer, which would require him to refinance it independently without my backing. He had good credit now. He had a job. He could refinance on his own. It would just cost him a higher interest rate, and it would require him to go through the process himself without me smoothing the path. I also had something else. When Hayden had moved into his off-campus apartment junior year, I paid the security deposit, $1,800, and I was listed on the lease as a financial guarantor. He'd moved out after graduation. The landlord had not yet finalized the deposit return because there was a minor cleaning dispute. I had been CC'd on every email. I was still technically a party to that lease correspondence. I didn't do anything that night. I just sat with what I knew. I want to be clear about something. I was not in a rage. I was not plotting revenge in some dramatic sense. I was a woman who had spent 3 years being financially useful to her family and who had just watched her son look at a slideshow without finding a single image of himself, and I had simply decided that being useful was going to stop. I slept on it, then I slept on it again. 4 days after the party, my mom called, not to ask how I was doing, not to say anything about the slideshow. She called to ask if I would be willing to co-sign a graduate school application loan for Hayden. He'd decided to pursue an MBA, and the program cost was $34,000 a year. I asked her to say that number again. She said it again. 34,000 per year, 2-year program. She said my dad and she had talked about it, and they thought if I co-signed, Hayden could get a good rate and it would really set him up. I said, let me think about it. She said, don't think too long. The application deadline is in 3 weeks. After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. Cooper was at school. The house was quiet. I thought about the slideshow. I thought about the thumbs up emoji. I thought about Priya didn't know what to include. I thought about $43,000 and a Honda Civic that died on the highway. Then I called the student loan servicer and formally withdrew as co-signer on the existing loan, triggering the independent refinance requirement. Then I emailed the landlord and withdrew as financial guarantor on the apartment lease deposit matter, removing myself from further correspondence. Then I sent Hayden a text message. It said, hey, I've been thinking about the MBA co-sign request. I'm going to have to pass. I've also taken care of removing myself from your existing loan and the apartment lease, so those are clean on your end now. Hope the new job is going well. He called me 17 minutes later. I didn't on. He called again. I didn't answer. Then my mom called. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was calm but clipped. Hayden told me what you did. Can you please call me back? Then my dad called. He left no voicemail, which for my father means he was genuinely upset. Then Hayden called again, and this time I picked up because I wanted him to say whatever he was going to say so we could be done with it. He was not calm. He said I'd blindsided him. He said the cosign removal was going to mess up his rates. He said I was being vindictive over a party slideshow. He actually used those words, a party slideshow, as if the slideshow was the point, as if what I was responding to was a minor aesthetic oversight rather than 3 years of being treated like a financial instrument with no other function. I let him finish. Then I said, you have a job. You have good credit. You can refinance on your own and apply for the MBA loan on your own. You'll be fine. He said, that's not the point. I said, what is the point? Silence. Then you're doing this because of the photos. I said, I'm doing this because for 3 years I paid for your education and you thanked me with a thumbs up and didn't put a single photo of me or your nephew in your graduation slideshow. But mostly I'm doing this because your mom just asked me to co-sign another $68,000 in loans 4 days later, and I realized that my role in this family has never been sister. It's been bank. He hung up. My mom called again that evening. This time I picked up. She didn't yell. My mom never yells. She does something worse. She gets very quiet and very reasonable sounding in a way that's designed to make you feel like you're the unreasonable one. She said she understood I was hurt about the photos. She said Priya was still getting to know the family and it wasn't intentional. She said Hayden was under a lot of pressure with the new job and the MBA applications, and I was making a hard time harder. I said, Mom, I paid $43,000. I haven't asked for anything back. I'm not asking now. I'm just not paying anything more. That's all this is. She said, but the loan rates. I said, he'll figure it out. He's a business major. She got quiet in a different way then. Then she said, I just don't understand why you have to make this a whole thing. And I thought, $43,000, and this is a whole thing. I said goodnight and I hung up. For about 2 weeks it was quiet. Hayden didn't reach out. My parents kept their distance. I went to work, picked Cooper up from school, made dinner, watched baseball games with my kid, and slept better than I had in a long time. Then something happened that I did not expect. Priya called me. Not Hayden, Priya. On a Wednesday evening from a number I didn't recognize, which is why I picked up. She introduced herself, which was slightly surreal. We'd met several times. She said she'd gotten my number from Hayden's phone because she needed to talk to me without him knowing. I almost hung up. I thought it was some kind of setup. But something in her voice made me stay on the line. She sounded tired. Not manipulative, just tired. She said, I want to tell you something about the slideshow. I said, okay. She said, I didn't put it together. Hayden put it together. He told his mom he let me do it so there'd be someone to blame if it came up. I only found that out last week when I saw the files on his laptop. I didn't say anything for a moment. She said, "I'm not calling to get him in trouble. I'm calling because I think you should know it wasn't an accident, and it wasn't me. And also because I think what you're doing, stepping back, is the right call. I've watched how this family talks about you for 8 months. You're always the responsible one. You're always the one who figures it out. Nobody ever asks how you are. I thought you should know someone sees it." We talked for about 20 minutes. She wasn't asking me to do anything. She wasn't asking me to forgive Hayden or reconcile with my family. She just wanted me to have the complete picture. After we hung up, I sat with that for a long time. That Hayden had deliberately curated me out, that he'd handed the blame to his girlfriend so smoothly she hadn't even realized it until she found the files, that this was not carelessness or oversight, it was a choice. The MBA program sent a formal inquiry 2 weeks later when Hayden applied for the loan independently. Because I had been listed as a cosigner on a related prior loan, the servicer reached out to confirm my status. I confirmed I was not participating in the new application, that was all. I don't know what interest rate he got. I don't know if he got in. What I do know is that my dad called me one more time, about a month after all of this. Not to argue. He called on a Sunday morning, which he almost never does, and he asked if Cooper and I wanted to come down for dinner that week. No mention of Hayden. No mention of the loans. I said we'd see. Then he said, "I know we leaned on you too hard. I've known it for a while, I just didn't say it." That's all he said. He didn't elaborate. He didn't apologize exactly. My dad is not a man who apologizes in the traditional sense. But for him, that sentence was seismic. I said, "I know, Dad." We had dinner that Thursday. Just the 4 of us, my parents, Cooper, and me. Hayden wasn't there. No one explained why. We had pot roast, and Cooper talked about his baseball team for 45 straight minutes, and my mom laughed at everything he said. And for a few hours, it felt like what a family is actually supposed to feel like when the money is out of the equation. I'm not going to tell you everything is fixed. It isn't. Hayden and I haven't spoken. I don't know if we will. Maybe someday, when enough time has passed and he's had to build something himself and understand what that costs. Maybe then there'll be something real to say to each other. Maybe not. But Cooper is doing well. He made the travel baseball team this spring. He still crawls into my bed during thunderstorms. And I sleep just fine. I used to think being the responsible one was a compliment. For a long time, I wore it like something to be proud of. I was the one who figured things out. I was the one who didn't ask for help. I paid my own way, built my own stability, and when my family needed something, I showed up, because that's what I believed good people did. What I didn't understand until that night in the car, driving home in silence with Cooper asleep in the backseat, is that there's a difference between being generous and being taken for granted. Those two things can look identical from the outside for years. The only way you find out which one it is when you stop. Hayden didn't erase me from that slideshow by accident. That's the part that settled into my chest like a stone once Priya told me the truth. He made a deliberate choice, assembled it himself, and then handed her the blame so cleanly she didn't even realize it for weeks. That takes a certain kind of intelligence, the cold, self-serving kind that knows exactly how to manage perception while protecting itself. I raised my estimation of him actually, not of his character, of his calculation. And that's what I kept coming back to in the weeks after, not the hurt. The hurt fades. What stayed with me was the clarity. I had spent 3 years telling myself a story about my family that the evidence didn't support. I believed in the version of them I wanted, not the version they were showing me. That's not their failure. That's mine. Believing what you wish were true instead of what's actually in front of you is a kind of willful blindness, and I've been practicing it for a long time. The thing about stepping back from a situation you've been propping up is that it falls. Not dramatically, not all at once, but it settles into its actual shape. Hayden had to refinance his own loan. He had to apply for his MBA without a cosigner backing him. Those are not punishments. Those are just normal adult circumstances that he was, by every measure, equipped to handle. The only reason they felt like a blow was because he built his plans around the assumption that I would always absorb the cost. I think about Cooper a lot when I think about what I want him to understand as he gets older, not just about money, about what it means to build a life with integrity, to do hard things not because someone is watching or because there's a reward at the end, but because they're right, to think clearly about your own situation instead of believing the comfortable story, to keep going when it's inconvenient, when it's lonely, when there's no applause. Those three things: doing right, thinking straight, and not quitting. I couldn't have named them in any formal way when I was sitting at my kitchen table that night. I just knew I was done performing a role that had stopped being real. My dad said he'd known for a while that they leaned on me too hard. That sentence, quiet and undramatic over a Sunday phone call, meant more than any apology would have. It meant he saw it. It meant the truth was always there, just unspoken. I didn't need him to say sorry. I needed him to say he knew. Some things cost exactly what they cost, and some things, once you stop paying for them, turn out to have been optional all along.